Charles Duffy, and this is Political Pulse. Tonight's guest is Jerry Pasternak. Jerry was the special assistant to Doug Duncan for 12 years. He was Doug Duncan's political and policy director. And thanks very much for joining us, Jerry.
My pleasure.
As I like to say, with respect to you, Jerry, you forgot more about county and state politics than I ever knew in the first place, but I really appreciate you coming on. But I want to focus on the Doug Duncan years first, 1994 to 2006, 12 years. You were right in the middle of everything. What do you see as kind of the big achievements, and it was clearly a different time then, but when you look back, what do you see?
Well, I look back, and the first thing I think about is downtown Silver Spring. That's an area of the county that the county had been struggling with for many years. The first thing that Doug did was terminate the previous agreement with the developer because nothing had been happening for several years, and went out and tried to figure out, what do we do next? How do we find a developer that partners with the community to make something happen? And I think it's been extremely successful.
It's kind of a different time back then. I mean, there was the run-up in the stock market. You had the capital gains. The county coffers were flush. I mean, that happens probably twice a century. You had the boom in the real estate market. The recording fees were coming into the county coffers. Now it's quite a different period, and you have the revenues. You don't have the revenues keeping up with the spending, but contrast kind of those years generally with these years.
Well, let's remember that when Doug was first sworn in, we were coming out of a recession. And so we were not flush with cash in those first years. We had some tough budget decisions to make early on, and we made those decisions. And then things started to turn around as the economy picked up. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that the county was diversifying its economic base, getting away from an economy that was truly dependent just on the federal government, because you'll recall being dependent on the federal government was a good thing until the federal government started to cut back. Then we started to feel the effects. So we diversified our local economy. We saw the takeoff of the I-270 corridor, DNA Alley, and then we were fortunate enough to be going through some good economic times. It's different now. The world changed a couple of years ago. Governments, national governments, state governments, local governments, all around the country, all around the world, are experiencing some very serious cash problems.
Is this, and the county's facing a $300 million deficit already. It's almost February 2011. The budget season's going to heat up here pretty soon, but you talked about the tough times. But is it, as you said, when Doug Duncan came in office, there was a recession, but are we in a cyclical type of recession here in the county, or is this kind of a singular, different type of recession that, this is a real structural shaking out period?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it is a structural shaking out, but it's going to take many, many years if we ever get back to the levels of revenues that we had before. So we need to make short-term changes, long-term changes, and change the expectations of what government is about.
Okay, and I want to get into that, and the county's facing a $300 million budget deficit. It could grow from now until budget season. You had 80% of the county budget, as I understand, is wages. The county government employee union's very strong. In the Democratic primary in 2010, a low turnout. The unions clearly flexed their muscles, got their elected representatives in. But how do you see this playing out? I mean, there's going to be tough decisions that are going to have to be made by the county council and Ike Leggett with regard to these wage contracts, these benefits that are being paid out, and to me, it's almost going to be like a battle royale. I mean, these endorsements, these county government employee endorsements, meant a lot to these people who got elected to the county council. Now the county council is really going to have to face some of these contracts, these benefit issues.
Right. Well, let's first of all, the county unions are a political force. There's no question about that. But let's also not overstate just how important they are. You have council members who can win without union support. Nancy Florine is a good example, who won twice running at large without significant union support. So you can do it. I think the key to winning is being well-funded, running a smart campaign,
but
having
it's tough
issues.
because, I mean, Dutchie Trachtenberg didn't make it, and some people attribute it to the fact that she didn't get the union endorsements.
Well, I'll attribute it to the fact that she ended her campaign with $140,000 in the bank,
and that's a good
had
point.
she spent that money, I think she could have won. She only lost by 3,000 votes. But going back to the question about making adjustments, having said that about the unions and about all organizations that endorse, I think the county is going to have to make some tough decisions for the long-term financial future to help eliminate some of the structural problems in the budget. And we may see, and we probably should see, some adjustments to health care, health plans, to pension benefits and the like, and maybe even salaries.
You follow this closely, even though Doug Duncan left, I guess, in 2006. But in 2008, the economy was starting to go south, and you were quoted in the Bethesda magazine. I guess there was a big fight then. You could see that they didn't have a great deal of money to fund these benefits and the union contracts, and I guess the council wanted to extract, or some of the council wanted to extract $40 million in union concessions, but at the end of the day, they ended up voting 8-0. They didn't extract the concessions. Here's what you said in the Bethesda magazine. This sent a very bad message, said Jerry Pasternak. If they felt the county employee compensation numbers were too high, they should have stood up and said, we can't do this. It came on the heels of everything going up, and people sitting at the kitchen table were trying to figure out how to balance their budget. Everybody's tightening their belt, and the government didn't do that. They expanded their belt, just raised taxes to cover things. And the taxes that they raised were the property taxes. They exceeded the property tax cap then. But you kind of saw this coming in 2008.
Well, it was a problem in 2008. I think it's gotten worse since then because the revenues have been coming in at a slower rate and the expenditures are still going up. So it's still a problem. Mm-hmm. It still needs to be addressed. What the council needs to do is not send mixed messages. Don't give us all the rhetoric and then don't give us the action. So be consistent. This is a different council than 2008. There are a lot of expectations and higher hopes that this council will be more collegial, will work together, will eliminate some of the infighting that we saw in the last council, and hopefully that will benefit the taxpayers and the residents of the county.
It's kind of interesting to me that battle that I just talked about that you were commenting on in the Bethesda magazine happened in May of 2008. And the property tax cap was exceeded then. The council decided to bring in more revenues that way. But in November 2008, the Vicker Amendment passed, which nobody thought, no elected person in the county thought this was going to happen. But the Vicker Amendment basically makes it more difficult to raise the property, to exceed the property tax cap. Now all 9 members of the county council have to vote to raise it. But what happened in May of 2008 really directly affected that November, 2008 Vicker Amendment vote.
No, absolutely it did. Again, it was at the beginning of the calamity of the world economy starting to collapse, and the message was a bad message to send to the voters. We're not going to make cuts. We're going to raise your taxes. It led to the Vicker Amendment. It led to the passage of the Vicker Amendment, but the other factor that contributed to the passage of the Vicker Amendment was that there wasn't really a concerted effort by elected officials, nonprofits, labor unions. There was no coalition to lead the fight.
Hands.
They all waited. I think people just assumed, well, this is a Vicker Amendment. Nobody's going to pass a Vicker Amendment, and lo and behold, it did pass.
Transportation, that was a big issue during the Duncan years, and I know that one of the was the end gridlock
Right.
slate, and I know that one of the proposals was to build the Purple Line kind of around the Beltway, but I'm amazed in the county how much debate goes into these transportation projects and how difficult it is to for any of these big projects to come to fruition. I mean, the highway, what is it?
Inter-county connector.
Yeah, the Intercounty Connector
Right.
took what was on the books for 40 years.
40,
Finally,
50 years.
it's being built. But comment on the transportation issues here in the county. And, these projects get debated forever. What
Right.
do you see? How do you see these playing out? And I'll just mention a couple of them: the Purple Line, the Quarter City Transitway, which is a project, mass transit project up the 270 corridor.
Right.
So how do you see it kind of playing out?
Right. Well, we are a highly educated county. We are a county that cherishes and encourages citizen participation, and as a result, there are numerous hearings, numerous meetings, and people come out and express their views, and they want to make sure that every T is crossed, every I is dotted before a project gets a final approval to move ahead. At the same time, when governments start to run low on cash, transportation tends to get pushed aside. There are either more immediate, more pressing needs, or in the views of those elected officials, there are other needs that take priority over transportation. The CCT, the Purple Line, these projects are actually moving along a lot faster today than the ICC did over its 4 or 5 decades of debate and discussion. And I think that's because there's a lot more recognition today that these are projects that we need. They're not major road projects, they're transit projects. And the community and elected officials and staff across the board are on board, if you will, to support these projects. It makes it a lot easier to move them forward. The only issue is going to be where's the money coming to build them.
And that's a big issue, though. I mean, that's the big piece of the puzzle. But the Quarter City Transitway seems more of a public-private type of endeavor. Purple Line, is going to rely mostly on federal dollars. The state and the county are hoping for maybe 80% federal funding, which is
right.
But do you see those monies coming in? Do you see?
I don't see them coming in the short term, but you push ahead, you get them ready, you get them approved, you get them in the queue, and then when the money shows up, you're ready to go.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a big shift. You mentioned there's a new county council. I think there's 3 new members since 2008, and really, it looks like to me what's going to happen is this transit-oriented kind of development near metro stations. I mean, there's already planned development at these Purple Line stations. The Purple Line's probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 years off at the soonest. But is that how you see it?
Well, I think that's the way to go. Transit-oriented development, build around metro stations, put your density there, and encourage people to use transit. Now, that only works if the transit works. Metro's having some problems. A brand name that was the gold standard is somewhat damaged now, and transit-oriented development will work. People will live around the metro if the metro works.
It's a very good point. I mean, the metro has a tough enough time handling what it has right now. I mean, if you focus on building around the metro stops, I mean, can the metro handle that additional traffic?
Well, that's going to be the challenge to whoever is appointed the general manager and the new team that they bring in. They're going to have to focus on fixing what they have and expanding what they have to accommodate the growth and the transit-oriented development.
Tonight's guest is Jerry Pasternak, who is the Senior Political Policy Director for Doug Duncan. We're going to take our break. We'll be right back.